Hello, my name's Toby, and this is my podcast. It's called Happy Times and Places, in which I watch an episode of Doctor Who that's been chosen by a friend of mine. I commentate along, I drop in facts and observations, all the while trying to guess what my guest's favourite thing about the instalment might be.
Hi, my name's Don Woodward. I'm a comedian, a magician, an actor and a Doctor Who fan. I'm here today wearing my Doctor Who scarf. This is a very special scarf, because first of all, my grandma knitted it, and secondly, this is the very scarf that features on Toby's CD of Moths Ate My Doctor Who scarf. The story I've chosen to talk about is Death to the Daleks. And the reason being is this is the first ever Doctor Who story I bought on VHS, and this is the very VHS. It's one of the only one I've got left actually on VHS, but I kept this because this is my first one. I spent ages choosing this in WH Smith's in Oldham. I'd got together £9.99, which was the price of it at the time, and I think they only had 4 or 5 different stories available, and eventually I went for this one because I think the other one I wanted had a run time of about 88 minutes, but this one was 90 minutes, so I thought I was getting 2 more minutes for my money. I loved this. I watched it again and again and again because it was the only Doctor Who story that I had in the house. So I've rewatched it on DVD the first time for what must be about 20 years, and these are my favourite things that I like from each episode. Of course, when I used to watch it, this wasn't episodic; it was cut together, so it is nice watching it in episodes.
Hello everybody, how jolly. It wasn't my intention to do Death to the Daleks today. I'd got this lined up for about 10 editions time, and I just thought I fancy watching Death to the Daleks, particularly episode 1 for some reason. And I had it ready to go because Dom Woodward, who you heard there, recorded this a while ago. It's lovely to see his face. I used to see Dom's face a lot because we were members of a show called the Unbroadcastable Radio Show. Dom was part of the later team of that. I was with it all the way through. And Dom joined us when a couple of members moved on to other things. And Dom has been a comic on the circuit for ages, and we used to gig together a lot when I was on the road a lot, and we used to play the same places. But I've sort of narrowed my sort of performance areas down a bit, and I know Dom has gone on to have great success elsewhere because he's done sort of children's entertaining and stuff like that, as well as being a circuit comedian. And he does lots of after dinner stuff too, sports after dinner speaking, humorously, etc. So he's carved a lovely niche for himself, Dom. So I don't see him enough, but like anybody, we're in touch because we're Facebook friends and all of that. And I'd forgotten because, of course, Moths ate my Doctor Who scarf. So I remember when we were doing Unbroadcastable Radio Show, we were in and out of the Comedy Store all the time at that time. So I would see Dom a lot, and I must have said, I'm doing a photo shoot for my it was then as yet probably not written one-man show that changed my life completely, and so I must have borrowed Dom's Doctor Who scarf. How wonderful is that? So that's the one that's on the cover of the book. That makes absolute sense. Well, how lovely that's still there. I will obviously, these were originally conceived during lockdown when doing videos was one had the time to do that sort of thing. So some of the contributors have recorded videos and say, look at me wearing this thing, which obviously if you're listening to the podcast you can't see, but I will be putting the videos, well, I'll put them first on my Patreon and they will eventually end up on the YouTube channel as well. I just need to have a big session of uploading videos, but they'll definitely go onto the Patreon first, because it's nice to have exclusives or early releases there. That's what it's all about. That's what keeps the wheels turning in the self-employed artist van. I think that might have been one of those metaphors that seemed better when it was conceived, wherever it was conceived, and came out, came into this world scarce half made up. Now listen, so we're going to watch Death to the Daleks, which just I had a fancy to watch it. I mean, I must be in a strange mood. I had a fancy to watch Terror of the Vervoids the other day, and whoever's doing that for me, I don't think has recorded their one, so I didn't do I didn't do it for Happy Times and Places. I just watched it for fun. And it's quite a thing. Now, but should I do Trial of a Time Lord as one release, though? I have got different people doing each of the segments. Now, that will obviously reduce the amount of times Colin Baker gets a release, but then it does mean Colin Baker will get a 14 on the trot. Or maybe I should do them each broken up, and then later on get somebody to do the whole 14 episodes. I would have to get somebody with a bit of welly, I think, to do all 14 episodes, or various people with different welly, and do Trial of a Time Lord twice. Can I? Anyway, why am I talking about Trial of a Time Lord? It is, if you want to listen to Trial of a Time Lord being talked about, go listen to Hamster with a Blunt Penknife's Strictly Come Hamster on season 23. That is what got me in the mood for watching Terror of the Vervoids, because I'd been out running. Yes, listener, I am trying to lose a bit of weight because I'm getting old, and I watched a Doctor Who DVD extra that I am on that will not be released for some years probably, and I look like I may wobble but I won't fall down, and it was quite distressing. And as I record this, I'm going off to do another one tomorrow, so I've tried to make myself look as svelte as is possible for a middle-aged man to whom nature has not doled out the A1 genes when it comes to stature, build, six-packery, and all of that. Nature doesn't dole out six-packery. You have to earn six, but you have to labour to get six packed. But I've tried, and I don't have the staying power. But I've been running anyway. I've been doing couch to 10k. How lovely would that be to do on the planet Exelon, where there aren't loads of people walking their dogs to distract your dog, and there's just not people. Although, yeah, I suppose people would be firing arrows at me, so it wouldn't be quite so much fun. Anyway, so come with me to the planet Exelon, which I've located on a place called BBC iPlayer, because this is not yet. Even if it was out on Blu-ray, I wouldn't be watching it on Blu-ray because it's easy for me to do it like this, and I do have it on DVD. I never had the VHS of Death to the Daleks, actually. So this was one that I watched quite late in the day, I think in episodic form. I don't think I ever had the edited together one, but I do remember it coming out because it was a very, very early one, and I do remember it being reviewed in Doctor Who magazine. And this was one of the very first Doctor Who's that you could own, not kids today that you could just get all of it at the touch of a button. You had to save up and you had to choose. Dom chose this. I had The Seeds of Death, I had Pyramids of Mars, I had Revenge of the Cybermen. Did I have any Pertwee VHSs? I'm not sure that I did, and then I'd started getting decent quality bootlegs. So I'm afraid the BBC videos were not for me because you could get them unedited. But then it was whether they should be good quality or bad quality. And I think actually always Death to the Daleks was always fairly reasonable quality because it was from Australia. But as we will see, that had consequences all its own. Oh no, was it from America? Who knows? Doesn't matter. There's podcasts that cover all of that sort of thing. So let us watch episode 1 of Death to the Daleks, which I know Dom's favourite story is actually The Time Warrior, but that had already been taken. When I first chatted with Dom, I remember where I was, the Frog and Bucket Comedy Club in Manchester. It must have come up that I was a fan and Dom was a fan. I think it was probably well known that I was a fan, and there weren't many comics who were Doctor Who fans. Now Dom is not somebody who I think probably buys the Blu-ray range or anything like that. He's a normal, he's somebody who likes Doctor Who but probably doesn't own all of it and probably doesn't get Doctor Who magazine. But he's enough of a fan to know the difference between the different doctors and the companions and all of that. So he's he's a normal person, but he likes Doctor Who, but in a healthy way. So let's see what I can enjoy about episode 1 of Death to the Daleks, a story I've been on something of a journey with, and what Dominic likes about it as well. He's slightly younger than me, Dominic, so we have slightly different sort of areas of reference chronologically, but obviously when it came to discovering old Who, we were both around at the same time when videos were coming out. He'll have been a little younger than I was, though. Okay, so let's fire up episode 1 of Death to the Daleks in 3, 2, 1. So here we are. I do like the sort of stars of this time tunnel that Jon Pertwee, which I remember I'm sure I talked about this on Planet of the Spiders and on the Time Monster. I was quite shocked to see this new Jon Pertwee title sequence that I hadn't really known had existed or had forgotten, and certainly the fact that you get his full body. But this opening was, I think, for a while missing, wasn't it? I seem to recall that the copy that they had of this episode was from Australia, who, as we know, can lop stuff out if it is too violent. So I've got a feeling when I was young, Death to the Daleks existed in full, but we didn't have this opening sequence, and then that came back from America, I think, something like that. So maybe that opening section is on a different video format to the rest of it, but it's harder to tell because it's on film. Or maybe they've since found, as they do sometimes, don't they? They find a million copies. But there was certainly a while where that was sought. I've got a feeling in the book, does he get sort of peppered with arrows, and he's like a sort of human pincushion or a dying porcupine? But it's and I think that would have been amazing, wouldn't it, if it gone thunk, 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 thunk. But still, what you get is there's something pretty grim about an arrow thudding into somebody, isn't there? You can't stun someone with an arrow. It's a pretty direct way of dispensing of somebody, and it means you get a thunk, and you can see as a little bit. It's such a quick shot, it doesn't matter. But if you're trained like Doctor Who fans are to see, you can see that's probably a reverse or a slow. There's something done with the film there to trick that arrow into Terry Walsh there, who then falls into but it's quite a Terry Nation opening, isn't it? We have the opening of Dalek Invasion of Earth. There's a man, it turns out to be a Roboman, sort of walking along, who then pulls off his helmet and falls into the River Thames. I think Nation quite likes to open sometimes with somebody we don't know in peril, gets killed. Okay, so we've set the scene. The place we are going to is a dangerous place, and Doctor Who's just about to arrive there. Now, what I remember about this would have been an episode I would have wanted to get through. I'm sure I've said this before on podcasts like this, but and the light we see the light on the ceiling. I think the suggestion is that's the ceiling light of the TARDIS, because we're pointing up at it, which we don't normally see, because obviously the TARDIS set doesn't usually have a ceiling, because that's where the boom light pops in, and there's no need to have one because you don't shoot, so you see a ceiling. That's it's usually a 3-walled Pross Arch kind of set. But yes, this is wonderful. This I would have wanted to rattle through this, to meet the humans, to see what it's going like on Exelon, to get the story started proper. And I would have had knowledge when I was watching this that I was going to have to wait till the end of episode 1 to see the Daleks. But actually, I've been even less interested in that, because I sort of know what the Daleks are like. I'd be keen to get to the guest stars and the guest characters, because they're the people who might not make it out of the story. So you want to see if you like them, you want to see what they're like. I'd read the book with the Target cover to beat all Target covers. But I wanted to get through this because it's like Terry Nation setting the scene, and we have this in so many of his stories. We have Joe, having to deal with the knackered doctor at the beginning of Planet of the Daleks, and then going out into the hostile planet. But starting the story off the back foot. And that kind of, I didn't have much patience for that sort of thing when I was younger because I wanted the story to get going. I'm so pleased that relatively recently, in the past 5-10 years or so, I got to the point where I go, well, I know everything well enough now that when I start at the beginning, I will accept episode 1 for what it is and not see it as something to get out of the way before the story begins, because of course the whole part of the story is setting up the environment, is hopefully having our characters start in danger. That's a great way to open a story. And I remember last time I watched this being so impressed with the way that Michael Bryant had made this scenario of our two lead characters in the main set and then coming onto this planet set. That's a beautiful overhead shot as well. Obviously, we know these days that that's a set, but I think that's a pretty good facsimile of the planet. You can always tell from the lighting, and if you're shooting on videotape, you're never going to convince that inside is outside just because of the sort of quality of the air, really. That sort of intangible sort of quality that outside has when filmed on videotape. But one was used to this, and it didn't. You didn't question it. It was you knew that it was. You knew what the television makers were trying to do, and they haven't just gone, well, we're never going to convince them, so we may as well not try. The lighting here is doing a beautiful job. It's beautifully lit. I think the sound is doing a wonderful job. Death to the Daleks is never going to, I think, be a classic, but I think this opening, which, as I say, when I was younger would have been, well, I know these characters, and I know this is just setting the scene. Look at that, the hand in the foreground with them in the background, and poor old Elizabeth Sladen, who I'm not feeling sorry for right now in her swimsuit, because she's in a studio and will be perfectly fine. But on location, you wouldn't want her to go out in that. And Doctor Who companions. So you've actually thought, everyone's thought about her there, which is quite nice. Is that she wouldn't want to be in that in a sandpit somewhere. So the scene in which she's wearing it outside is actually inside. This is only her third story, and they've already got this lovely rapport. I think Pertwee looks magnificent here. I like this outfit that he's got on. It's not too dandified. It sort of fits him like a glove. Some people with frills and velvet, it sort of sits awkwardly on them, but Pertwee absolutely fits him like a glove. And some of his sort of less muted colours, perhaps. I think may date a bit more like the one that he wears, I think, in Spiders. But this one, I think is absolutely fantastic. Lots of POV shot here from Michael Bryant. That's terrifying. I love the use of smoke on the planet's surface. The planet is sort of sandblasted and barren. The wind on the soundtrack. But again, another lovely aerial shot that makes them at least, trying to show that our characters are sort of little blips on a larger landscape, even though the set itself is not that large. I think that's a good stab set wise at giving us somewhere to meet the planet in the studio before we go onto location. But yeah, this was always a rather. Nobody's really wild about this story. I'd been quite keen to see it because there's a picture in the Doctor Who monster book of the Doctor and Belial, and Belial looks like this sort of wizened corpse thing. It's a costume that photographs rather brilliantly. But here this is a bit like the Muto stalking Sarah in Genesis of the Daleks. You know, Terry Nation has his ingredients that he flings together, but they kind of work. Oh, and somebody finding a thing that belonged to the person who's now obviously in trouble because they've left the thing that they'd never leave. And this is where we're getting the first. Oh, and there's blood on it. I mean, that's the end of episode 1 of the Keys of Marinus, isn't it? You know, he knows how to do all this stuff. But these, I think, but look at that. That is magnificent. Bit of smoke on a sandy location. I think the fact that it's on film helps. That wouldn't look nearly so good on VT. The fact that it's shot with, I'm assuming that's a little bit of a day for night filter rather than waiting till night time, but I'm happy to be corrected on that. I mean, you don't need to actually correct me because I'll probably go and look it up later and satisfy myself. So I don't need any help. But if it scratches an itch for you to correct me, that's fine too. It's all part of the process, isn't it? Now, yeah, I mean, I love the fact that the TARDIS is a little Heath Robinson, but it's very it's very acoustic. It's very unplugged, isn't it? This tool. Well, I don't know what they're called. This bendy spanner. There's also one in Revenge of the Cybermen, isn't there? Which I think you would now sort of go, no, we'll have a futuristic version of that sort of tool. But that now Sarah beats a man to death. Well, not to death, but that's again, that's the effort gone into the POV, which has the cloak covering some of it. These sort of moving hands, the Exelons, these sort of silent, stalking creatures, cowled and mysterious, and I love the way that the hand that sort of moves, and the sort of guiro music that's accompanying it is pretty spooky. And you know, Sarah's, and what I like about the way that Elizabeth Sladen hits this guy is that she hits him, but she's not enjoying it. You know, I think quite often a modern day leading character would be shown to go, well, if I need to hit someone, I will do it. She's actually pretty disgusted at what she has to do because she's not somebody who naturally whacks people about the face and neck with a spanner or whatever it is. Don't write to me about what that's called either. I will never use one. I'll get a man. Actually, I'm not that bad. Let's not get into my uselessness or otherwise, because Jon Pertwee is about to do some Venusian Aikido. And I love the fact that we've got a bit of night time here. I love the fact that it's sort of dusk on the planet Exelon, and I think these and how handy he's being, and you know how he's having to quickly sort of fashion himself some form of defense as this thing advances on him, which shows that he is quite a handy fighter, but again not in a. But it's the clever thing with Pertwee, because he never seems his violence never seems too visceral and macho, you know, because it has this self-defense element to it. So you have your cake and eat it. You have an action sequence, but it's not one that's unpleasant. It's just one of those very smart ways of making Doctor Who work in the way that they do. You know, it gives you the thrills and spills, but without tipping over into anything that would not be suitable for children. So how long have we had so far this episode where we're still only speaking characters? And they haven't said much, Pertwee and Sladen. And, I mean, they're separate, so they don't, you know, there's no dialogue carrying this at all. It's all atmosphere, it's all discovery, but it serves a purpose. It's not padding. You know, here we have the city of the Exelons, which I think is a great model. There was talk of the city not being particularly impressive. I think that's a lovely model. It's a beautiful contrast to the sandy, rough landscape everywhere else, these perfect lines and the beautiful white. I think that immediately suggests, oh, this is cut from a different cloth, if you're hewn from a different stone. Look at that Exelon against the landscape there. You can sort of just see it. The camouflage element of it works so well. I think that's really clever and really impressive, and it adds to that feeling of sort of being eavesdropped upon. It's a bit. I've just been listening to a podcast about Predator, which is a film I absolutely adore, and I would never say there's much stylistically similar between Predator and Death to the Daleks. But the idea of creatures that can sort of merge into the landscape and of silent stalking horror, this is... and the fact that they're not speaking, and the fact that we don't cut to them going, "Wait a moment, Ugg, I shall follow the stranger and we shall bring him back to our village," or whatever, or avoiding all of that stuff makes it seem like it makes it a bit heartily, and there is it's been commented before that Terry Nation has returned to Doctor Who in the Pertwee era, having written for it in the 60s, and has a sort of 60s sensibility, which he doesn't even sort of particularly lose when he's doing Destiny. But I'm not sure that's necessarily a bad thing, because Doctor Who should be a mixture of styles within one season. You don't want all stories to be the same, and there are unifying elements to this season. Look at that, and that's a lovely, great bit of daring do, and that's brilliantly executed. That rock that falls down, I think that's a pretty convincing rock, and that's quite a nice storytelling sleight of hand, because we've seen him being stalked by the Exelons, although that was, if you looked carefully, you could see that was Terry Walsh at one point. But you think, is this trap been laid by these mysterious silent stalkers? But actually, we suddenly got people. So what? 15 minutes in, it's like, oh, hang on, there are people here. So now we'll have the story unfold. But we've already had bits of the story. There's a power loss. There's this mysterious city that has lights. There's another lovely bit of sacking of the Exelons. I think the Exelons are a great presence in this. And here we have, of course, and I did notice that when Sarah was approaching the TARDIS, that was on film. So they've got the same location portrayed by film and videotape, but they've done it cleverly enough that you're not jarred, and you don't go, "Oh, that doesn't look like it looked in the studio," because of the way that it's shot. There's a bit of hazing around the CSO there, but here we have the lovely humans, and a band of desperate humans, one of whom is wounded. I'm surprised one of them's not using a wheelchair or has an eye patch, but or a somebody's damaged, which ups the jeopardy, and that's and then we've got a character here who's not terribly nice, Duncan Lamont's Dan Galloway. We've got the beautiful Jill Tarrant, who I know Jon Pertwee took a bit of a shine to, played by Joy Harrison. We have the Quatermass, TV's first science fiction monster, Duncan Lamont, who is in the Quatermass Experiment. So he has a special place in my heart. Not a special place in my heart as John Abernethy as Captain Richard Railton, who has, of course, played Van Lutyens in Fury from the Deep, and General Carrington in The Ambassadors of Death, and will go on to play Ranquin in The Power of Kroll, a great servant to Doctor Who. I have a letter from John Abernethy. He's mentioned frequently in Moths Ate My Doctor Who scarf, that Dominic's scarf is on the CD cover of. I think Duncan Lamont's hair is too tidy. I think everyone's hair's a little bit too tidy. You'd rough everybody up a bit. You'd sweat them up a bit now. I mean, the men have not shaved, and that would have to be. You'd have an instruction sent down by your agent going, don't shave for a few days. But yeah, at least their clothes are a bit dirty. I think they could have just gone slightly more with the fact that they've been. But I suppose in those days as well, it was part of what you would do if you were, you would, even if you were a military person, stuck in the jungle somewhere, you'd still press your clothes and whiten your shirt. This is really, I'd totally forgotten about this. So they've got the pictures of the city, and then we have that lovely fade to Sarah coming across it, and the dialogue going slightly echoey. I'd totally forgotten about that. I think this is full of wonderful directorial touches from Michael Bryant. And so we've got another, typical Nation thing of splitting the Doctor and companion up. So he's finding out one thing with the crew, who are going to now fill him in on the SS exposition, and she's going to go to find the city, which will become important later on. And of course, this is a very Nation thing. And I was talking about how, there's an element of Nation that is very much, I'm doing Doctor Who in the 60s. But I don't mind that. I like a story every now and again that feels a little bit old-fashioned, because, in fact, I've just watched a TV series which got some a modern TV series. It's got quite a lot of bad reviews because it's got a few cliches and stock characters and whatever. But you know what? It was really straightforward, and it had action bits at the right point. It had cliffhangers at the right point. The twists and turns came. Look at that. I mean, that's great. I love that. And then the way they slightly wobble because they're sort of shapes. And there's actually, I think when you're a TV aficionado, you can sort of get really excited by things that do complicated things and mess with form and mess with linear structure and all that. And then it gets to the point where you go, do you know what? I actually, what drew me to this stuff is that there are certain formulae that I kind of like, and I do love my happiest memories of TV watching as a kid were watching the Poseidon Adventure and the Towering Inferno and James Bond movies, which all were sort of done in a certain way. And I particularly like disparate group of characters in a perilous situation, and they have to survive, and along the way some of them won't. Joy Harrison was for a point missing. We didn't know where she was, and then Richard Bignell discovered that she was in Canada, so that then when I came to do I first contacted Joy when we were doing the DVD commentary for this, and we knew that we'd not been. Now, again, if we were to have done that these days, we'd have hoiked everyone together on Zoom, but there was no way we would get somebody from Canada to contribute to a Doctor Who DVD, so I thought, well, let me email her and ask her some questions, and then I'll see if so at least we get a contribution by proxy. And she did, and then we kept in touch, and she told me she'd missed some things from Great Britain, and I'll maybe tell you about that in later episodes. And here we have Julian Fox, who's I think Julian's quite old now, but he's always looked a lot younger than he actually is. So, Peter Hamilton, named after the film cameraman, is supposed. That's one of those terrible things of sort of multi-camera telly, is that Joy Harrison has to keep acting there because she's seen the spaceship, and again, that's brilliant, the way that the Exelons lurk, and because the camera doesn't move or cut from face to face as you'd probably do now. Nice bit of peril here for Neil Seeler, who's not had much luck in Doctor Who as Commander Stewart there. He lasts a bit longer than he does in the Sea Devils, where he's killed in the very first scene, but I think he was a chum of Michael Bryant. And here you have Di Evans, the miner. You've got Mostyn Evans as the Exelon High Priest, who I think got the part because he's a marvellous Welsh singer. He's also uncredited as the taxi driver who picks up Geoffrey Palmer at Marylebone Station in Doctor Who and the Silurians. So he actually has 3 Doctor Who roles, but only 2 of them are credited. And I'm sure I've said in another podcast that he died on the 23rd of November. I don't know why that sticks in mind. Well, I do know why it sticks in mind, but because it's the 23rd of November. And it's obviously the High Priest is perhaps seen as a slightly more evolved or higher form of being, because he can chat quite amiably. I think they're probably more, although I do like the singing noise, which we'll get onto the sound of the singing, which I think adds atmosphere to those what could be quite hokey sacrificing scenes. I like that about the 747 they've been planning, which we never hear about again, but it adds to a little bit of world building. But John Abineri knows it's not a Space Corps craft, so what's it going to be? The CSO has trimmed Jon Pertwee's hair there a little bit, and here we have the end of episode 1, which is often cited as a blooper because, I mean, the blooper for me is the fact that the music has been designed to rob the Daleks of all their menace, although I know some people absolutely love this music, but it's a slightly comical for me. But people cite this as a blooper because they're firing and you don't see the negative effect. But actually, in the way that it was done before you saw the laser effect come out of the gun, there would be a delay, especially in the 60s, where the vision mixer or whoever it was would have to apply the effect. So there was a sort of delay between the firing and the death. And I think sometimes, action sequences, the audiences were expected to wait for a couple of seconds while things all connected, because they were used to so doing, while an effect would be put on, or, somebody would be shot. You'd see someone fire a gun, and then you'd cut back, and the actor would have to sort of wait until they were hit, and then they'd be hit, and things didn't happen quite so instantaneously. So I'm not sure I would put that down as this big mistake that people are so keen to characterize it as. But I think we are encouraged to enjoy pointing out mistakes because it's the way that we're made these days. And I actually think I will give them a pass on that and go, no, it's one camera going, they're firing. It's the other camera going, they're being fired at and they're going to die in a minute. And then it's the final, close up to go, so how are they going to get out of this firing gun? Whereas in real time, you would expect fire, zap, dead. In television grammar terms, I think you are used to that being a slightly slower process. So I wouldn't say that's as big a blooper as many people would. There's all sorts to talk about. What a lovely cast to talk about. And I'm particularly thrilled that, even though I know Jon Abernethy doesn't make it past episode 2, and I was rather upset when I saw in the Doctor Who programme guide that he played Railton, because I'd liked the character of Railton in the book, and then of course he gets spoilers. He gets, well, we'll talk about that next week, but next time. But even though he's and in some stories you can sort of tell who's not going to make it all through, because the actors that are in all 4 episodes, or most of the episodes, will get credited first. You go, why is that person credited? But Jon Abernethy, as befits an actor of his stature, gets a second guest billing for playing Captain Richard Railton, behind Jon Abernethy, behind Duncan Lamont, with whom he has a bond, because Duncan Lamont died. It is Lamont, isn't it? But I've been saying Lamont since I was little, but I think the Scottish properly is Lamont. Duncan Lamont, who was married to the actress Patricia Driscoll, who only died a couple of years ago. She was made Marion to Richard Green's Robin Hood for a bit. And they were quite a well-known sort of showbiz couple for a bit. But Duncan was making an episode of Blake 7 and did the filming and then died. And Jon Abernethy was cast to fill his boots and had to go on location and sort of follow in his footsteps. He died only a few days before Christmas, Duncan Lamont, and so before the studio sessions, which were due for the following month/year, and so. It's the episode Hostage, isn't it, of Blake 7? So Jon Abernethy actually took over from Duncan Lamont, during what would have been Duncan's last TV role, but he unfortunately didn't complete it. His last TV role was I think an episode of Secret Army that was broadcast only a few days before, or at least a week or so before he died. But his death isn't particularly covered in. And he was a well-known actor, he was a very well-known actor, but it's mentioned in his local paper, but none of the nationals cover it. Don't think he even gets an obituary in the stage. So I do get cross sometimes when, actors who deserve an obituary don't get one, and I sometimes fight unsuccessfully to get somebody noticed in the national papers. But actually, this is not a new phenomenon, and there are actors that you would think everybody knows who they are, who either get a little paragraph somewhere or nothing at all. And I suppose that depends on family and agents and all sorts of other things. And I suppose because it happened around Christmas time as well, there are other things on journalists' mind, and of course lines of communication are so different from now. But what that meant was that in a lot of things like Quinlan's character actors book, or for example, there was no death date for Duncan Lamont, even though he'd been dead for many years, because that information hadn't quite got through to anybody. And it took me a while to discover that he'd actually died and when. And again, this is prior to the internet existing, because a lot of reference books had him as still being around, which he wasn't, and indeed hadn't been for most of my life, because he died in the late 70s. So anyway, let us. He'd also having been a big, strong, sort of muscular actor, he'd let himself go a bit. He's much sort of bulkier towards the end of his life, because he's not that old. He wasn't that old when he died, sadly. Good earthy actor though. I'm sure we'll talk more about Dan Galloway and Duncan Lamont and John Abernethy and indeed Joy Harrison, Julian Fox, Uncle Tom Excellent, and all. And we haven't even got to Belial because he's not in it yet. So, episode 1. Well, it's a beautiful thing. It is an exercise in mood. It is, as I say, an episode I would easily have dismissed and would have, if I was probably collecting it, I'd have and getting it on an E180 where you could only fit 7 episodes. I might have even asked for episodes 2 to 4 and then a full 4-parter and gone, well, I'll get episode 1 at some other point, because I want to get into the meat and drink of the story. I'm not unsure that episode 1 might not be the best episode. It's a funny old story, Death to the Daleks. As I say, it's not really many people's favourites. And Dominic's intro there, a lot of it was about the fact that it was nostalgic for him, because it was an early video, and we all remember our first times, or those stories that we that when there was only a handful that we had access to, that we watched over and over again. But I've grown to like Death to the Daleks a lot more in later years. I've grown to like the Pertwee era a lot more in later years, but I think I warmed to the more traditional ones, the Unity ones first, and still considered his outer space ones to be slightly out of character, slightly compromised in terms of success, partially due to practical things, but also to do with the scripts. But I actually think Death is one of the more successful exercises. It's also quite economical because it's only 4 parts, but it does, well, we'll see, because we know it does go a bit wayward in certainly the last 2 parts, but there's also plenty of good stuff to come. But episode 1, beautiful episode of mood. I love the way that the Exelons are this curious silent presence, and the way that Michael Bryant hides them behind a polystyrene rock, or has them against the landscape, or shoots them with just a little bit of them in the foreground, and that wonderful POV shot. I wonder if that might be my favourite thing, actually, is the use of the Exelons, even the slightly sort of wobbly gait they have when they come towards the camera and shroud the camera. I think under certain circumstances that wouldn't work and might look a bit not very good. I think of the wobbly crinoid at the end of episode 4 of the otherwise perfect Seeds of Doom, but it's slightly different, because it's not supposed to, the Exelons aren't supposed to be a mass of vegetables. They're supposed to be becloaked figures, and so a wobbly cloak is a wobbly cloak in a way that a wobbly rubber green skin is supposed to look like moving plant foliage. But honourable mentions, I think, to the sparseness of the soundtrack. I think early on they very wisely don't use music too much, and that's not a comment on the music, although there will be comments on the music. That's just a comment on whatever the soundtrack, whatever the score would be. I think having it so sparse works, and then that, as I say, that sort of guiro scraping when the Exelon that's been knocked out, sort of his hand starts to move towards Sarah, I think is excellent. It's sort of spare and spooky and unsettling, and I think that's really good. The lighting is excellent. I mean, the fact that they, there aren't many episodes of Doctor Who that are actually that dark. A lot of even the most atmospheric Doctor Who is quite, could be quite floodlit because of the nature of videotape, but because they've turned the lights off on the planet, because the film is in dusk, It means that there's some beautiful atmospheric lighting, even on the surface of the big wide expanse of the planet, albeit a studio set rendition of that. But the lights in the TARDIS being off, and we see the light go off, and that's quite fun because that's a talking point, isn't it? It's in Death to the Daleks that we see what actually lights the TARDIS, for the first time since that giant thing that they quickly got rid of in the first season. So the lighting, I think, by Derek Slee is really impressive. I do like the sound as well. I like the special sound that Dick Mills has popped in there, that has the sort of the echoey, windswept, cold, again, sort of, because it makes it slightly sort of sparse and haunting and scary. So the special sound is excellent. Bernard is barking. Is there an Exelon? No, Sheridan's back, so I will finish this point off when I've said hello to her. I was going to chop that bit out, but let's keep it real, hey? So, sorry, I got interrupted there, and it's now sometime later, but I will do my best to just add the other things I could have chosen. I was thinking of choosing Michael Bryant. It's I think it's choice, because always with classic Who, the person who makes the most impact on a story is generally the director. They are our the person whose stamp is on it, who presents it to us, who to translate the writer's vision, or indeed improve the. So that's quite a boring way of doing it, and it's funny with Michael Bryant, because I would always probably choose Douglas Camfield or Michael Ferguson, because they put such an they have such a so many trademark ways of going about their work that really improve a story and work well within the confines. And I'm less inclined to do that with Michael Bryant, and yet I don't know why, because he is extremely experimental in places. He has his own trademarks. He does do interesting things with the camera. I wonder if it's because Camfield and Ferguson are sort of really good at pacing and almost sort of cinematic on occasion in their approach, whereas what Michael Bryant is doing is maybe more televisual, and that is less alluring to sort of commentators. I don't know. Why am I? Because I think Michael Bryant is an excellent director. I think he's really good, and yet I would, and obviously behind some classics, Robots of Death would not be Robots of Death, I don't think, without Michael Bryant's really intelligent approach to the world building, and of what is a fairly traditional sort of story, but he presents it in a way that is fresh and invigorating. Although that's got a lot to do with the design and the visuals, so that's him working in collaboration with the designer. But there are so many flourishes, I think, in that first episode that means Michael Bryant definitely deserves a name check. I wonder if we take him for granted because he hung around so, and is perhaps as not as grown up, if you like, as Camfield. Camfield feels like the big kid. Your older brother's come to, brought one of his books around. Oh God, this has got guns with silencers and a lady in the shower. I don't know what book that is, but it's probably got Nazis in it. Anyway, I think. I think the lighting is great. I think the sound is great. But I think my favourite thing for episode 1 of Death to the Daleks has got to be the use, the filming of the Exelons in a way that makes them a really sort of scary, presence, and that makes use of that design. It's not just in the studio because there's the POV, there's that hand accompanied by the guiro, there's that brilliant shot of one of them, atop a big sort of rocky mound, and it almost blends in with it. I just think they're a wonderful threat for an opening episode. What has Dominic chosen as his favourite thing for episode 1?
From episode 1, my favourite thing is the sequence where the TARDIS loses its power. First of all, the main power goes, then he sets off the backup power, and that drains. Then he gets out a torch, and that drains. And I just love that sequence because obviously it's getting worse and worse, and the problems are piling on.
Yeah, I mean that is the main element of episode 1 that hooks the viewer, is that very Terry Nation thing of, it's a bit Survivors-y, isn't it? So we're in this fantastic spaceship that travels through time and space. We arrive on this planet and it immediately goes, well, that doesn't work anymore, and plunges the TARDIS into darkness. And of course, that's very 60s, because a lot of the 60s stories are about how do we get back to the TARDIS? We have to travel across China or whatever. And where the environment itself is as much of an enemy as the malfeasance of politics, or the terrifying nature of monsters, or the evil space people who are doing bad things. I think we do lose that as we get rather blasé about space travel and time travel and different planets as we get used to the show. That idea that the very environment that we've landed in could be a threat to us, which is again very Terry Nation-y with his scary drungles and his radiation and all of that, is something we've almost sort of grown out of, because actually we would probably be a bit annoyed if we got to a story now and the first quarter of it was just existing in the environment, and we'd be like, we want the story, thanks, because we need the psychic paper to not have everyone accused of being a spy, like we need the sonic screwdriver so somebody isn't locked up in prison and has to spend ages getting out. We've kind of moved beyond that, because our expectations of these kind of stories are now built on our understanding about how some of the things work, and they're sort of aspects of the formula to be sort of got out of, because of course in real life, if you landed on many different planets, the likelihood that they'd be breathable for us and the temperature would be comfortable for us is extremely small. But you go, but we don't need stories about that, because that's just about somebody escaping a fire. I need a baddie, I need a character, I need a plot, not just scary air or lack of. So whilst I acknowledge that I would probably get, if Ncuti Gatwa landed on a planet and spent 20 minutes going, I'll have to find something to fire up the power, and I'll have to find something to, a special TARDIS spacesuit to breathe with, because there's I'll be like, oh, come on, let's meet some people. So it's very much something that is a luxury of of delving into the archive, because you go, well, this is very much of its time, but as an example of its time, I think it's really effective, and I love the fact that we can dive into the archive and watch an episode. As I say, when I was younger, I would have probably been willing to be over, and maybe even would have skipped or not minded not having, if I was going to watch the story, if I had episode 1 at the end of a 6-parter, I might go, I won't be bothered to fast forward through that and watch episode 1. I'll just start with episode 2. And I would have missed out, because I do think it's possible. Well, let's see as we progress. If episode 1 is the best episode of Death to the Daleks, but I think it's a cracker. I think it's really good, and so congratulations to all, and thanks to Dominic. How lovely to see him. He's such a lovely man, and I will revisit him and you. Well, but I might have to do it by just talking into a tin can and recording the sounds onto a wax cylinder on a turntable, because I've got a feeling the lights have gone off, and
the lights are blinking here, and
and the power's gonna... Well, thank you ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydoke, and my special guest, Dominic Woodward, who can be found on Twitter/X at Dominic Woodward, WOODWARD. He's an excellent comic. Do follow what he gets up to. I'm grateful to my old mate Dominic and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Sydney Wilson, David James Wilson, Andrew Willis, Rhys Williams, Michael Williams, Tom White, Stephen White, Adam Westwood, Gary Wales, Apollo C. Vermouth, Sabrina Tirabassi, Damien Timmer, Nick Temple, Neil Tate, Stephen, David Shepherdson, Graham Slate, Keith Say, Jim Sangster, Mark Sandham, John Rivers, Dylan Rees, Scott Pride, Kevin Parker, Jonathan Potter, Melvin Pena, Adam Parker, Dave Owen, Graham Knott, Matthew Newton and Christopher Newman. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Would you like your name read out on the credits and all sorts of other goodies? Well, if you go to patreon.com/Toby Haydoke for as little as £3 a month, you get bonus releases, advance releases. You're always ahead of the pack with access to the latest episodes of Toby Haydoke's Time Travels. There are a couple of episodes ahead with Too Much Information. They also have their own exclusive podcast called Far Too Much Information, which is mopping up that arcana that doesn't make it into the mother podcast. And you get behind-the-scenes looks at my various DVD, Blu-ray extras, and all sorts of other things, including monthly exclusive AMAs. So actually, they've gone to more than monthly because people have been Aing me too many A's, but that's fine. That's what it's all about. And it's a lovely place to sort of hang out and chat about Doctor Who without anyone being grotty. If you don't want to do that, but still want to help these things along, you can go to kofi.com/Toby Haydoke and do a one-off donation whenever you like. But if you can't support these financially, that's absolutely fine. I'm simply grateful to you for listening. It's lovely to have an audience out there. But what really helps to grow that audience is if you go to Apple iTunes thing and give these Toby Haydoke's Time Travel 5 stars and a few lines of review to enable more people to be aware of and find these podcasts. And anywhere else that you can like and subscribe and give 5 stars and give a few lines of review, it really, really does help. And remember, these are also now out on YouTube as well, so you can do them that way as well if you like. There's no accompanying video, it's just a placeholder, but it's another way of pushing it out there, which is what we have to do these days. So yes, there is a YouTube channel, Toby Haydoke YouTube channel, which you can follow, which I'd really love it if you could do. It's not monetized or anything like that, so there's no adverts. It's just another way of me getting my stuff out there. And you can also do, I don't think there's adverts. I don't really know how it works. I hope there aren't adverts, but I'm not sure. So don't hold me to that. I do need to give some attention to the YouTube channel, but I'm just getting the stuff on there right now. I also have a Facebook page. Don't do my sort of personal Facebook, which is me, because it's got too many people, many of whom I don't know. So I need to shift them over to the Facebook page, which is for me as a performer, which is where all my work stuff goes. And you can follow me on Twitter twice. One, my feed at Toby Haydoke, which is about everything that I do, and one at Haydoke Podcasts, which is about what's happening with these podcasts. So, yeah. Oh, and there's Instagram as well, at toby.haydoke, which also has details of my comedy club, Excess Malarkey, which is in Manchester every Tuesday night and is well worth a visit if you want to pop along. In fact, that was the last time and place I saw Dominic when he came to try out a new magic trick about a year ago. Look, I've got to go and do a Doctor Who documentary, and there's loads going on in the house, and I need to get this out, so the post-credits thing is a little bit noisy and a little bit hurried, and there'll be better ones elsewhere, but for now my power is running out.